Picking up from last time, my to-do list has grown quite significantly. There's some things that I'm going to come back to, or that I'll have to come back to later. Adding individual actor templates for ships, adding discoveries, certain things. I actually did fix this. This is something that I wanted to show today, fixing the cursor tooltip. So I'm going to grab this, pull that out of there, and drag it to the bottom of my list. There's a couple other things in here I haven't quite figured out yet. There's some compass sprites that I don't know if I want to use. There's a couple other options, game over stuff that I won't get to yet. But since I've been working on rover stuff, I've actually added a few new things. I've been working on a little black hole animation. Just to kind of play it. It's not very fancy, it just has this black center, little spear thing, and then these swirls. I don't know how to do the 2D disc style, or not even 2D. I haven't figured out a way to do a disc for this that goes across the front like some other black holes, so I'm using this swirly black hole right now. I've done a couple things since my last video, other than adding new graphics. I've actually touched up a couple things, added a couple small changes. Ugh. Got dust on my desk here. Whoa! Sorry, that was incredibly loud. So I've added green frames, color change, so when I click on things, it's distinguished with a green frame. Go scan my planet. Now it matches the frames that I have everywhere else, which show up when you highlight hotspots. They're green as well. And then when you're on the planet, I've set up sound effects and green frames for selecting tiles. I also added a little condition that stops you from moving around when you're trying to mine something. So, you know, if you've got something selected, it'll stop you from scooting away from the target. Now, I haven't added the condition to check, so you can actually mine from any distance, which is kind of crazy, and that's not what I want. So I think that might be the first little detail that I add here, fixing the ability to mine from any distance. And that's a quick and easy one. Since I've got it set up in this temporary button, I'm just going to continue to use this temporary button. And it's got these conditions here. I have to add comments to. This one checks to make sure nothing else is actually happening or another mining event. And then this one makes sure that the variable for a tile has been, or an object on the surface, has an object or tile on the surface been selected. And the reason these two come first, just want to make sure that nothing else is happening, because you'll be able to scan or interact with different things, and then you've got to make sure something is actually highlighted first, and then I want a different condition in between there, so I'm just going to copy paste that one. Is the rover close enough to the target? And rather than have this or yes and no, I just want to do something simple. Check the distance, and there's two options here. Actor distance lets you pick two actors to compare the distance. So since I'm not using an actor at all for the second part, I really just want to use the rover actor rover.x and actor rover.y as my source, and then the destination is going to be what we've been, or what I've been doing this whole time. It's going to be checking the selected object coordinates by looking in this variable here, surface selected. But I want to split I need to get the nth element in a split collection, so I want to split into collection that global variable surface selected. I'm splitting it by semicolons, as I usually do. I want the first entry there, and then for the y, I can copy paste that and change this 1 to a 2. That'll find the second entry. Since this variable is going to be holding 2 number values, each one is a coordinate. So that might be a little confusing. If you haven't watched my other video before this, I kind of explain that one a little bit more. So this will check whether the actor or the rover is close enough. What this is, actually this value right here is going to give me the distance, but I want it to check to make sure that the distance is less than. And we'll go ahead and say the tiles in 001 are 32 pixels, and I don't want it to be too far away, so 32 times 4, maybe 4 tiles or so, which would be about 128 pixels. So if it's less than 128, then it will do this. Otherwise, we want it to do the out of range sound effect, which is all the way down here. Out of range. And instead of doing anything else, I just want it to play that sound effect and then go back through and turn off the action wait. So what this should do is if I'm too far from a tile, it should play the out of range sound and do nothing until I get close enough. I went ahead and added my old title theme to that title screen, so it's not so empty when you're going through the title. So if you're 4 tiles, out of range, out of range. Maybe something like 3 tiles. 4 tiles is still kind of far. Well, that's not too bad. 4 is actually kind of okay. Out of range. So that keeps it so I can't mine from way the heck far away. I also added some changes to my tiles so you can drive closer to the edges of them. All I had to do is increase the boundaries, or the edges. I had to do some actual graphic editing to fix all of my blending gradients, but now you can drive right up on them almost, so it actually looks slightly better. These mountains up here are still using the old tiles, so I still have to fix those, but that is really all it takes to add that distance check, and it works everywhere. It'll work no matter what. So I'm out of range. So I want that delay to be a little bit longer, but I'm just going to leave that the way it is for now. That's not too bad. Give me just a second. Okay, so that's one little thing knocked off the list. Another little thing I added, I want to show you guys how to do this. I'll have to show you what it is before I can really explain it. And 1 second. Okay, so normally you see... Oh. guess you don't. Where'd it go? Now I'm kind of curious. I broke something. I don't know how I broke it. What's going on here? My mouse over disappeared. Well, I was going to show you guys something that I did to fix the mouse over. Huh, what did I do to it? So normally when you've got your mouse over anything, it positions the cursor overlay Why is it not? Let me see. I did disconnect a switch that I don't know if I even need or not, but maybe I do. I have a switch that I disconnected that I wasn't sure. I swear when I disconnected it, it didn't break anything, but who knows? Sometimes something stupid like that. Yep, that was it. So my mouse over is back. Okay, I just wanted to show you what I did to it. So when you scan a planet normally, it starts out as question marks and then changes to the name of the planet whenever you scan it. However, I was having this issue with the mouse over going all, like whenever you get too far away from an object, the mouse over box or tooltip would just be floating over all these buttons. So I had to add a little script in here that keeps it capped to where the camera edge is. This is easier to see, I guess, with a longer name. But when you get close to the edge of the screen, it kind of holds it in place there against the side of the screen. And this is really useful for all kinds of stuff. It's actually how I'm doing these little navigation indicators that are floating around the screen. There's a function inside 001 called Clamp, Math.Clamp, and I'll show you what I mean really quick by going into my actor templates and entering in these little scripts here. So there's a whole lot going on here. Most of it's not really important. You don't actually have to look at a lot of it. I'm going to keep this here for now because I've got to figure out how to remove it. I don't actually need this switch anymore, but for now I'm just going to leave it there. Right now all it's doing is turning on a switch, say that something's highlighted. It's storing the name of the object that's being highlighted, and then it resizes this highlighter field or the highlighter frame to be the same size as the object that's being highlighted. And that's where you see the selection frames on the screen whenever I'm highlighting objects. Next thing it does is position the little cursor tooltip. And the script here looks a little complicated, but it is not that bad. Basically all it is, if you ignore the Math.Clamp stuff here, and I scooch just a little bit further this way. Basically, it's taking the cursor's X and the cursor's Y position and adding a small little offset to it. So I can do this in Paint just to do a quick little demonstration. So I've got my mouse cursor, and then all it's doing is positioning this field 12 pixels to the right and 32 pixels below it. So we're getting this kind of effect where the tooltip appears down here to the cursor up here. Just add a little line there just to make it look like a cursor. That's an ugly cursor. So all it's doing is adding an offset there. And then this sort of complicated looking thing is taking the screen size, both the X and the Y, and subtracting the interface X and Y. That's the size of the interface on the screen and then the size of the screen. So the screen size is like the actual, I believe, the height and width of your whole screen, and then the interface size is the size of the interface that's being displayed. I don't remember all the details there, but you subtract the interface size from the screen size, divide that value by 2, and you get this position in the middle of the screen, offset by the cursor's position. So the cursor's position is subtracting the screen size from itself. And then there's some other stuff here which has to do with the math clamping. And so starting from the 0, basically the start script is just this, or the basic script. I'm going to copy it and paste it over here in my to-do list so you can take a look at it. The basic script for aligning the cursor, or lining something up with the cursor, are these 2 lines here, which I can grab the Y here as well. And all that does is position it to the cursor's position, and then when the screen changes size, it'll actually adjust it. I think there's some other stuff I'd have to do to... Actually, I don't, now that I'm thinking about it. Just kidding. Ignore me. So, the next part, you'll see this little 0 here, and then you'll see this part of the script back here. Field full screen camera dot size x minus field object name bg size x. What Math.Clamp does, if you search clamp in here, you'll get this little event or use value called, it's a use value, not an event, a use value called clamp number. And whenever you have a value or a number that you want to make sure that it's within a range. So if I want to keep this number within a range of, say, 1 to 10, I would set my minimum value here to 1, my maximum value here to 10, and then the value entry here, the value that's being clamped would be my cursor position or whatever value. So let's say I just paste that in there. Any value this gives me, when it's between 1 and 10, it will get returned correctly. It'll be, if it's 5, a 5 will pass through. But if it's lower than 1 or higher than 10, it'll actually cap it. It'll cap it and keep it from going higher than 10 or lower than 1. So really what I want to do with this is, all I want to do is make sure that the tooltip doesn't go off the right side of the screen over here. And so if you remember the interface, the camera itself, the camera field is only, I'd say 4/5 of the screen, and then there's the sidebar over here. So I really only need the width of my camera field, which is called full screen camera. So let's say I paste that in there. I want it to cap it, the minimum position to be 0, because along the left side of the screen, it can touch the left side of the screen, which is 0, and the tooltip will extend over from the left side of the screen rather than going off the screen. So I don't need it to cap anywhere here. But then I want the max value to be the size of the camera, field full screen camera dot size x. But then rather than it capping it at the right edge of the camera, I want it to subtract the width of the tooltip so that it positions it here rather than over here. So you subtract the width, field object, object name background, which is the name of my field, size x, and then you get this big long value, and it will clamp the position of that field to within the frame, within the camera frame. I'll cancel that. Anything else will just, this is actually positioning it to this field. So these are two different fields. This is the name field and this is the background. So the background is just getting positioned to wherever the name is, and the name is getting clamped to within the camera frame. So you don't actually have to clamp anything else that's moving with it, because it'll automatically be clamped already. You may have also noticed that there's a sound now. Whenever you click on a tile, that took some fiddling. You actually have to add more conditions in here. if you're working with a tile selector, just in case, if you want to add a sound effect, I'm just going to show this script so you can copy some of the conditions. First, make sure it's targeting the map, or targeting any map. Then I had to make sure that it's targeting the same map that the rover is on. Then, check to make sure something is actually being highlighted. So if there's something being stored in this variable, it will then move on here. And in order to prevent the sound from happening every single time you click the same square, I just have to check to make sure that the highlighted variable, if the highlighted variable is equal to the selected variable, that means if the tile that's currently being hovered over is the same as the tile that's already being targeted and selected, do nothing. Otherwise, play a sound effect. I also went ahead and changed the colors of the selection frames. So now the selection frame is green. I should actually change both of these. It's not super important unless you have other conditions going on, but eventually I will. There's going to be a retrieve color later, further down the line, for mission objects. Mission objects will be highlighted in yellow instead of green. But I haven't quite gotten there yet. So fixing the cursor tooltip so it doesn't go out of the camera balance, that's done as well. I also have another issue. Pretty easy one, but one that I want to fix really quickly. Go turbo mode, go land on the planet. Oops.
Entering planetary orbit.
Okay, so when you're on the planet, the rover also has its own little weapon. It's got a little laser. But you'll notice I can just rapid fire it everywhere I go if I just keep pushing the button. That's not desirable, and there are some ways you can fix this. I'm going to use a specific method that I've set up already for my spaceships. So whenever a spaceship is firing, or whenever the player is firing, I have this big ol' crazy script here, and this is what I'm going to use for the rover as well. I don't want to save that. I'm going to break it down, get out of here. I like the use weapon event because it lets me pick the accuracy if I want it to be perfectly accurate, or if I want to use the accuracy that's stored in the item itself. I'll explain that here in a second. So I'll just want to save that and go over to my weapons. I'm going to go to the rover beam. Now this menu, the first time you ever use it, it can look a bit complicated. It's slightly complicated, but it's not as complicated as you'd think it might be. A lot of this stuff I'm not going to be using for this project, such as holding frames, because the ship will never be holding a sword or a beam or anything, and I don't think I'm going to have individual parts on the ships for every single item in the game, because that would be nuts. So basically I don't need this section. All I really need are the sounds and layers and some logistics stuff. But to break this whole thing down, you've got your display name, your scripting ID, like all the other items or areas in 001, and you can give it a description. Let's see, a basic stun beam for terrain vehicles. And over here you can give it an area of equipment. I'm just going to keep it in the beam because it's a laser type weapon. You've also got triggers over here that you can use. I don't use them very often, but sometimes I'll use them to change statistics or change certain things. When you equip an item, you can have it change or turn on a switch or something. You don't have to use any of these. These are only for very specific things, like if you want to change the graphic that the player is using, you can actually set it up in here, or attaching sprites or effects, particle effects, whatnot, because you can use the character clothing section here to determine where on the player graphics change or whatever. But all of these triggers you can use. You can set the price, how much it weighs. I don't need any of that. So the sound effect section on user is whenever the player or the person using this weapon uses it, what sound effect does it play when it shoots? I want it to play my pew pew little normal beam sound. And then sprite on user, this will come later. It's sort of like a flare or muzzle flash concept, or if you know, like you're casting magic and you want a poof of smoke to appear on the player, you can use this sprite on user section. It's basically the exact same thing for on target, except these are for what happens whenever the projectile hits something. So it'll play a sound effect when it hits something and play an explosion or whatever effect you want to play on the target ship or target tile or target area that's being hit. Pickup graphics are for whenever you're using the built-in item drop system. It'll just show a little icon on the map and you can tell it what size that is, and that's all determined over here. I'm not going to be using those right now. Then you have the logistics statistics screen. All of these determine how much damage, how fast it goes, or not how fast it goes, but how much damage, how it affects your player statistics, how you can use it, how much ammo it uses, blah, 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 blah. If there's an item like a bullet that you have to purchase, you have to select it here. You know, if you have ammo count, like this weapon needs to be reloaded and you run out of ammo, you can set that all up here. And then there's stuff like attraction distance, which if you fire the weapon and you're using the built-in AI, does the AI hear you or detect you for using this weapon? All of this comes into play sometimes. I mostly just use the statistics to determine like how much damage it does. And then you have this item constant section where you can store more information like a damage type. You could add as many as you want, and I'll show some more of that as I work on it later in the project. Then on the third tab, you have projectile melee. This is how many projectiles come out at once. You can have it shoot 5 at once, 2 at once, 3 at once, whatever. I'm going to go with 1. I'm using my projectile light beam effect with a speed of 40, maximum range of 1,000 pixels, so it'll go off the screen in all directions and a little bit further before it stops. And then, since I'm in a top-down game, I only want it to affect the Z direction, which is the rotation on the Y-axis, or Z-axis, I mean. It's the top-down rotation, basically. All the rest of this stuff I'm not really using. It's not a slashing weapon, it's not a seeking weapon, it's just a beam. So I'll go back into my controls and break down the script that I'm using. I have a script here just to detect a switch here to detect whether anything's actually being firing. This is almost the same as my action weight, only I only want it to be set up for weapons, because weapons can be firing while you click on an action. I believe I'm going to include the action weight somewhere else in this. I'll probably run into a case where you're doing something and you can still fire your weapon, and I don't want that to be the case. So first, it's going to check this value. Is the weapon counter counting down? If it's anything but 0, go this way and decrease the weapon timer. So it's going to decrease it by 0.1, and then it takes a little delay, checks to see if it's still higher than 0, and if it is, just repeat this little section over and over and over. If it's not, if it's greater than or equal, or if it's equal to 0, not greater than or equal to, less than or equal to 0, I mean, then turn on the weapon firing switch and store the use time. So I want to pull the actual use time of the weapon that I've got stored in the items and magic editor. But since I don't have that variable here, I have to create it in my local variables. It's called firing weapon. And that'll show up here now. And all it's doing is checking the rover. Actor's rover equipment, whatever it's got equipped to its beam equipment slot here. And then it's checking for the use time, which is a number that you can set up in the items and magic editor. Multiplying that by times 0.0001. That's giving me a number to use in this little system here. And then it fires the weapon, in the direction that the rover is pointing, so it's easier to see it here. This is converting everything that I get into radians, which is a value between 0 and 3.14. Normally, it will return a value in degrees, which I'm getting here. The degrees of the actor's rotation, which is 0 to 360, it's going to round that value to a single digit, or no decimals, basically. I don't remember why I have so many rounds going on here. I might not even need that extra round. I actually might have done that on accident. I wonder if I can delete that. Let's do that. I probably don't need to round it twice. Okay, I probably mentioned it in a few other videos that I work overnight, so I get a lot of time to do this, but sometimes I get interrupted, which is okay. So this, let me try and fix that again. Doot doot doot. I want to get rid of one of these math rounds because I don't remember why I have 2 of them. I don't think I need 2 of them. Probably not. I just want to round the degrees to a single decimal place with no decimals, and then convert it into radians, which is 0 to 3.14. And then it's just going to check this value holding the use time, and it's going to subtract it every 0.1 seconds. This is just so I can't rapid fire the weapon, and I can base it on the actual use time that I set up. And then there's a little branch here. Is the firing button being held? This is a control branch. I use this a lot in my controls. You'll see if you're holding a button down, have it go to a 0 frame delay before you link it back to the beginning of your script. Ooh, I got a hiccup. Link it back to the beginning of your script. If you don't have this little delay here, this loop will actually freeze. It'll cause your game to freeze and hang up, which is not what you want. And if you're not holding the button down, it'll take this path and say, no, I'm not firing anymore. So I just want to check that, make sure that works. It should let me hold down my firing button for the rover so he can shoot his weapon over and over and over.
Entering planetary orbit.
Okay, so it's not showing up, but it is firing. So I'm not sure why. I might actually have to include that stupid Math.round. There might have been a reason for that, but I'm not sure. I'm never sure about anything. Comma 0. Actually, let me double check that whole script just to make sure, because I'm never sure. How's it going? Rover. There we go. I was checking the player ship. I still don't think I need this math.round here. I only need 1. I think. So just want to make sure everything is set up to the rover. Turn. Have a good night. Usually that's the case. I just accidentally set something to be the ship instead of the rover. Still not sure why. It is possible I do need that stupid Math.round. I might have had that there for a reason. Who knows? Comma 0. I actually don't even know if I need this script to be as complicated as it is. I might just be able to use the rover's direction angle. I think I had the script set up originally to base on the actual facing direction, which was I had like a 16 directional movement script set up, so you could, or not movement, but facing direction, so the players could face 16 directions. I don't know if I'm going to do that. Let's go ahead and just copy this over here. Say actor rover direction angle, and this is set to main because I'm a Dumbo. I'm sure you guys all saw me do that watching. So I want to make sure it's set to the rover. It's always something stupid like that I do. I don't even think I need all that complicated scripting there for the angle. I just need it to shoot in the direction that the rover's pointing. Excuse me. Turbo. There we go. Now I can't rapid fire, and even if I do try to rapid fire, it'll just fire at the same speed that the weapon's allowed to fire at. And I can fire all the way up to the point where I'm trying to mine. I can even keep shooting while I'm mining. I just can't move. And that might be what I like. I kind of like that. What I'm hoping to do is have the turret so that it can shoot towards the mouse, I think. And then you can mine and shoot depending on what's going on. You might have to shoot enemies or little creatures or something. There's going to be robots or turrets and drones, all kinds of weird little things that you have to fight or interact with. So now I've got that fixed. Fix the rover being able to fire repeatedly. My to-do list is just insane right now. Don't actually need these anymore, so I'll get rid of those. Save my to-do list. So I knocked out about 3 or 4 things here. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. Got about 40 minutes in here. I want to actually sit down and work on some different stuff. I've got a whole bunch of menus that I still need to add from the old project, so I can do save game stuff and just resume where you left off. I also have to actually implement deploying the rover, so that's going to be probably a whole video in itself at some point. But looking at the to-do list, there's some things that will take longer than others. Obviously, adding behaviors to the enemy ships is going to be a tricky one. I'm going to have to do some planning for that. And then various menus that I need to add, and using probes. I would like to add the probe system soon. So I'm going to take a little break. I'll be back here just a little bit. Go to screamingbrainstudios.com. Get all kinds of free stuff. Free textures, free tools, free tile sets, free tutorials, free everything. There are buttloads of backgrounds, images, interface pieces, old school dungeon stuff. Everything's free, public domain. You can use it however you want. You can actually edit it and redistribute it if you want. Public domain. This is for all projects, free and commercial, doesn't matter. And then I've got a list of free tools and stuff, so I like to mention these every time just in case you guys want to get into making games or making graphics. I've got a whole bunch of stuff you can start with for free. Anyways, thank you guys for checking out the videos. I'll be back in a bit with another part of the Making a Space Game series. Hope you guys are enjoying, and if there's anything you guys want me to cover, just let me know in the comments. Again, I'll see you guys in a bit.